Dr. Marcus Webb could tell you the exact distance to Alpha Centauri, calculate the gravitational pull of Jupiter on its moons, model the death of stars with equations so elegant they resembled poetry, though he would never call them that. What he couldn't tell you was why a 12-year-old girl's question had been keeping him awake for 3 months. The question came at the end of a public lecture on cosmic background radiation, one of the university's monthly outreach events designed to make cutting-edge research accessible to curious minds. His specialty, the echo of the universe's birth still humming through space like a song 14 billion years old. After the applause came the usual questions. Technical ones about measurement tools, theoretical ones about inflation theory. Philosophical ones he dismissed with practiced deflection. The girl raised her hand last. She was slight, maybe 6th or 7th grade, sitting beside her father in the 3rd row. She stood when Marcus called on her, serious as a witness taking an oath. "If you can explain how everything works," she asked, voice clear and certain. "Why does it feel like something is watching when I look at the stars?" The auditorium went quiet. Marcus smiled, the patient smile he perfected for simplified explanations. "That's your brain recognizing patterns," he said. "Humans evolved to detect faces, threats, intention. When you look at something vast and complex, your mind tries to find familiar structures. It's not actually watching you. It's just perception playing tricks." The girl nodded politely. But something in her expression, disappointment, pity, suggested his answer had missed entirely. That night, Marcus found himself thinking not about the content of her question, simple neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, well-trod territory, but about the way she'd asked it, the certainty in her voice. Why does it feel like something is watching? Not does something watch, but why this persistent, cross-cultural, seemingly universal feeling of being seen by the cosmos? If you're new here, welcome to Tale Ranch. This is where the human condition is explored through story, tales crafted with care, brought to life through the voice you're hearing now. Subscribe if stories like this one speak to you. Marcus told himself he'd spend one afternoon resolving it. A literature review, maybe a few calls to colleagues in cognitive science. One afternoon became 3 months. He read papers on the neuroscience of awe, studies showing how the parietal lobe quiets during experiences of wonder, how the default mode network, the part of the brain maintaining the boundary between self and world, temporarily dissolves. Interesting data, but it explained mechanism, not meaning. Knowing how the brain creates the feeling didn't answer why it existed, or what it was for. He interviewed a Trappist monk who'd spent 40 years in contemplative silence. The monk listened, then said, "Perhaps what watches is love recognizing itself. In silence I've learned the observer and the observed are never truly separate. What you call watching might be the universe becoming aware of its own presence." Beautiful. True, perhaps, but not an answer he could use. A quantum physicist suggested observation itself creates reality, that measurement collapses probability into actuality. Maybe the universe needs observers. Maybe being watched is what makes it real. Closer, at least it was physics, but the metaphor still felt like a reach. He tried meditation, treating it like an experiment. Controlled conditions, careful documentation. Sat in his observatory after midnight, trying to quiet his thoughts, trying to feel what the girl had felt. Nothing. Just the familiar hum of his consciousness analyzing itself. An infinite regression of observation with no breakthrough, no transcendence. Marcus realized with growing frustration that he'd approached the question the only way he knew how, as a problem requiring solution, a mystery requiring mechanism, a phenomenon requiring reduction. But what if some questions didn't want solutions? The thought made him deeply uncomfortable. His entire career had been built on the premise that everything could be understood, given enough data and sufficient rigor. Mystery was just ignorance waiting to be educated. Wonder was just awe at complexity not yet simplified. But this question, this young girl's simple question, refused simplification. Every explanation he generated felt true, but incomplete, accurate, but insufficient, correct, but somehow missing the point. Marcus began avoiding his colleagues, stopped attending conferences. His graduate students noticed the change. Their advisor, once sharp and certain, now distant and preoccupied. Even his department chair suggested that perhaps he needed a break. But he couldn't stop. The question had become an obsession, a splinter lodged too deep to extract. He filled notebooks with approaches, frameworks, potential resolutions, covered his office walls with diagrams showing how consciousness emerged from complexity, how meaning arose from matter. None of it satisfied. Late one October night, Marcus walked outside onto the observatory's observation deck. Autumn air, cool and clear. No moon. The Milky Way stretched overhead, a river of ancient light. Marcus looked up, and for the first time in 3 decades, he didn't try to measure what he saw. Didn't calculate distances or identify constellations or estimate luminosity. He just looked. The stars looked back. Not literally, he knew that. Knew the photons hitting his retina had been travelling for years, that nothing up there was aware of his observation. But the feeling the girl had described, that sense of being seen, of mutual regard between observer and cosmos, flooded through him with sudden intensity. It wasn't the stars watching him. It was the fact that he could watch them. That the universe had organized itself into patterns complex enough to produce consciousness, and that consciousness could turn around and contemplate its own origins, and that this recursive loop, matter observing matter, the universe knowing itself through the eyes of a middle-aged astrophysicist on a cold October night, was itself a kind of relationship. The girl hadn't been asking for a mechanism. She'd been describing an experience. And experiences couldn't be reduced without being destroyed. The way you couldn't explain a joke without killing it. Marcus had spent 3 months trying to explain what the girl felt. He should have been trying to share it. The realization arrived without trumpets or visions. just a quiet recognition that he'd been asking the wrong question. He'd been treating wonder as a problem. But wonder wasn't a problem. It was a response. Maybe the only honest response to existing in a universe vast and strange enough to produce beings who could ask questions about it. Science could tell you how the stars formed, map their composition, predict their deaths, measure their distances with staggering precision. But it couldn't tell you what it felt like to be a human standing beneath them, feeling small and vast simultaneously, alone and connected, watched by something that might be the universe itself, might be consciousness recognizing its own reflection, might be what people had always called God. Not a being, but a relationship. Not an entity, but the space between observer and observed where meaning emerged. Marcus stood on the observation deck until dawn began greying the eastern sky. Then he went inside, sat at his desk, and pulled out stationery. Actual paper, actual pen. Dear young astronomer, you asked me a question 3 months ago that I tried to explain away. I want you to know I couldn't stop thinking about it. I read everything I could find about consciousness and cosmology and the neuroscience of awe. I interviewed mystics and meditated and filled notebooks with equations. Here's what I learned. I kept trying to explain why you feel watched, when you were really asking something deeper. What does it mean that we feel this? And do you feel it too? The answer is yes. When I look at the stars now, really look, not just measure, I feel something I can't reduce to brain chemistry or evolutionary advantage. It feels like the universe is aware that I'm aware of it. Like consciousness recognizing itself across impossible distances. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's God or quantum entanglement or just the beautiful strangeness of being matter that can wonder about matter. Maybe those are all names for the same thing. What I know is this. The feeling you described is real, even if it's not measurable. And asking questions science can't answer doesn't make you unscientific. It makes you honest. Thank you for asking a question that changed how I look at the stars. Thank you for reminding me that some things are meant to be experienced, not explained. That mystery isn't ignorance. It's the deepest truth. Keep looking up. Keep asking questions. And when something feels too big to explain, let that be okay. Yours in wonder, Dr. Marcus Webb. He addressed the envelope to the middle school that had organised the field trip, mailed it before he could second-guess the gesture. Marcus didn't stop being a scientist, didn't abandon his research or turn to mysticism. He still calculated orbital mechanics and modelled stellar evolution and published papers. Still taught his students to measure carefully, question rigorously. But also to recognise what measurement couldn't capture. But something had shifted. A spaciousness had opened in him. Room for questions that had no answers. For experiences that resisted reduction. for the honest admission that the universe was larger and stranger than his equations could capture. On clear nights, he would return to the observation deck and stand beneath the wheeling galaxies, feeling that persistent sense of being seen, not by a bearded god or a conscious cosmos, but by the relationship itself, by the fact of being a creature capable of looking up and asking why. The stars didn't answer. They never answered. But their silence felt less empty now, felt almost companionable. And sometimes, standing there in the dark, Marcus would think about the girl and wonder if she still looked up, would hope she'd learned what he was still learning, that some of the deepest questions aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be lived, carried like light through the long night, held like breath between measurements, offered like prayers into the vast and watchful dark, where something, God, universe, consciousness recognizing itself, was always, mysteriously, impossibly, watching back.